The starting point of my contribution is the question of the role of contemporary new media art in caring for the legacy of the historical, artistic and scientific avant-garde, using the example of the 50-year theatrical performance in the process, Noordung 1995-2045, or in short, the Noordung Project, by the Slovenian artist, theater director Dragan Živadinov and his collaborators. I examined the topic in the context of recent heritage science initiatives and debates shaking up cultural heritage, particularly with regard to identity, sustainable management, and social and environmental changes. Care is in the title of numerous social policy practices, care in the community, care packages, heritage care, etc. And so the duty to care for cultural heritage is enshrined in current laws and state structures. The history of object care in art, and especially in museums, here is dominant visual, museum care as protection, and so on, is an important part of a comprehensive theory of care. Any analysis of cultural heritage must recognize that it is always embedded in certain cultural norms and expectations. I therefore explore how the concept of care can help to open up new perspectives on our relationships with the heritage of the historical, artistic and scientific avant-garde, especially when care is practiced through with contemporary art, as in our key example of the Noordung Project by Živadinov. I also turn my attention to an aesthetics of care in art projects to show how many artistic processes demonstrate that care is realized through the activating of making and taking part in artistic practices. This is about the integration of processes so that art making is also an act of caretaking or caring. We follow the care aesthetics, obviously supported by relevant historical and recent aesthetic discourses. I don't have here the space to go into this, which applies equally to art practices and care processes. For James Thompson, the relation art-care is not about care is not art about care or art in care settings, but the art of care. Dictionaries define the term care in relation to productive guardianship and the provision of what is needed for well-being, along with the notion of attentiveness and consideration. Here I refer to Bernice Fisher from 2023. Charlotte Woodhead argues that the concept of care, particularly in the context of the ethics of care, is an appropriate lens through which we can examine cultural heritage. Because we care about the cultural heritage, there is a desire to care for it. I'm quoting, by approaching all cultural heritage through the lens of assessing how it is cared for, one can see how communities, local, national or international, recognize its importance, how they enjoy it and how they fulfill any responsibilities to current and future generations. End the quotation. So more attention has recently been paid to the intangible elements of cultural heritage as the central importance of participation and communities has been recognized. Care as an active process centered on relationships and communities provides the framework for communities of care as an invaluable way of bringing together different systems concerning with heritage. In our case, we are talking about a certain community of artists, cultural workers, and also a local community. I'm thinking here of the community of the small town of Vitanje, to which I will return later, inspired and or led by Dragan Živadinov, who takes special care of the heritage of the avant-garde and therefore strive to preserve it. Let us delve a little into the history of this care. With founding of the retro avant-garde movement Neue Slowenische Kunst in Slovenia in the 80s, Živadinov revived some of the fundamental principles of the historical avant-garde tradition within the field of theater. He used the term retrogardism as unified artistic stylistic formation of the NSK. In his efforts to realize a work of art under zero gravity conditions, the artist referred to the avant-garde idea of overcoming gravitational forces and entering outer space. Malevich's suprematist idea about future space technologies has had a profound influence on Živadino's conception of the complex and long-term theatrical process, also known as post-gravity art. So he coined the term in the 90s to describe future art beyond gravity. One of the key works of art heralding post-gravity art is also the levitational construction from the Trieste constructivist ambient by Edward Stepancic. Here we can see the construction and you can find more information, more detailed information about it. Here is Edward Stepancic, who is, let's say, less known Slovenian visual artist. Beside this, the concept of a geostationary space station set out by the Slovenian space travel pioneer and visionary rocket scientist Herman Potočnik Noordung, who published the book The Problem of Space Travel, the Rocket Motor, in Berlin in 1929. So this is also crucial to this project and hence bears his name. Potočnik was one of the first engineers to draw a technically detailed design for a space station. His depiction is one of hallmark of the Noordung Project. I believe that this project is quite well known, so I will just go quickly through the main phases, only to get to fall a bit into this atmosphere. Otherwise, I will try to follow more this issue of care. The project is based on idea of 5 repetitions. So far there have been 2 repetitions already. So first was in the Star City in 2005. The second was in 2015 at XEOT. So this is Cultural Center of European Space Technologies in Vitanje in Slovenia. In this basic idea is also that this play will be played with 14 actors and actresses once every 10 years until 2045. With the bodies of deceased actors being replaced by remote controlled signs, kind of robots, which shall appear in the final phase of the performance as cognitive synthetic constructions placed into the Earth's orbit. Otherwise, Dragan Živadino staged and performed one of the first performances in Zero Gravity, Biomechanics Noordung in 1999. So he realized the performance with his collective called Cosmokinetic Cabinet Noordung in collaboration with the Center for Cosmonaut Training Yuri Gagarin in Start City near Moscow. In his manifesto, 50 Coordinates of Post-Gravity Art, Živadino briefly introduced the historical sources and his basic ideas for post-gravity art. So post-gravity art stems from the tradition of the historical and scientific avant-garde, like suprematism, Slovenian constructivism, Russian cosmism and transhumanism, and so on. Much of Živadino's theatrical work can be understood as a great artistic tribute to the memory of Herman Potočnik Noordung. We saw only through these my mentions before, Cosmokinetic Cabinet Noordung, naming of the 50-year Noordung theater processes and so on, which also has an impressive effect in reality. I have in mind here the monument in the form of the Cultural Center of European Space Technology, XEOT in Slovenia, in the small town of Vitanje. where Potočnik's family on his mother's side came from. Živadinov was also a great motivator for the reconstruction of the already mentioned Trieste constructivist ambient, which is another important reference, as I already mentioned, for his 50-year theatrical research. One can speak of a special kind of care for the avant-garde heritage by the artists themselves. The aim of this paper is to identify the dimensions of such care from the perspective of heritage science, which is a highly interdisciplinary academic field. In my case, it includes philosophy, philosophical aesthetics, political philosophy and ethics, art theory, and a broader theory of care, which should be addressed for a comprehensive investigation of the concept of care in this particular contemporary art practice of Živadinov. In searching for scientific dimensions of care in Živadinov's project, I refer here to Groys's philosophy of care. Groys believes that when we take care of a certain tradition and begin to practice it here and now, with the goal of helping this tradition survive, our mode of care should change accordingly to the way in which the world has changed. And further, I'm quoting, of course, we cannot only care for artworks from the past. To care for a tradition means to continue it, in this case to produce new artworks. But what does it mean to continue an artistic tradition? Does it mean to cultivate the old artistic techniques, or to produce the old life forms that produced these techniques in the first place? It seems that this kind of care work would be too exhausting for the caretakers, especially if they are confronted with art production of a greater scale. Thus the question emerged: what are the minimal conditions for a work of art to be recognized as a work of art, and as such, as a continuation of an art tradition that deserves the work of care? That was the central question that the avant-garde tried to answer. Indeed, the artists of the avant-garde understood works of art as things that present themselves to the gaze of the spectator as they are, and not to represent anything else. There is a widespread opinion that the art of the avant-garde was a manifestation of creativity, an explosion of the vital creative forces. In reality, however, this art was a result of reflection and expansion of care. I have too much papers in my hand, just give me a second. The avant-garde reduced representation, narrative, everything figurative and naturalistic, to present artworks as mere things. The history of avant-garde movements is the history of this reduction, from Malevich Black Square to contemporary conceptual artworks. Since Duchamp, art care was extended to all kinds of everyday objects. Avant-garde artists began to take on the role of curators and organize exhibitions and publications. The word curator, as we know, actually comes from the same word cura, or care. The curator takes care of the artworks with the goal of keeping them visible, accessible for contemplation. This is exactly the case with Dragan Živadinov as the director of artistic events, such as the so-called exhibition informances. So here I have few examples, but there are many others also. We tend to associate a curator with an exhibition organizer, exhibition maker, who uses the artworks in an artificially created context. It was the French Revolution that offered a new way of dealing with valuable things from the past. They were defunctionalized and presented as art and cared for by curators. But I cannot go into this genealogy of the modern museum and the figure of the curator here. In the next step, I follow Bryce's radicalization of the analogy between the human body and the artwork, characteristic for 19th century, by referring to Nikolai Fyodorovich Fyodorov, or Fedorov, one of the main representatives of Russian Kosmism, a philosopher, prophet of human immortality and the resurrection of the dead. So I have in mind here his project of the common task from 1906. For Fedorov, the common task of humanity is the artificial resurrection of all previous generations. Fedorov chooses the museum as the starting point for the realization of this project. Fedorov sees the potential of technology in the fact that it is also functioning as art, which is understood as the technology of preservation and revival of the past. All people who have ever lived must rise from the dead as artworks and be preserved in a universal museum that would be identical to the universe as whole. Groys argues, I'm quoting, the overcoming of the boundaries between life and death is here not a matter of introducing art into life, but is rather a radical museumification of life, or transposing the whole society into the heterotopic museum space. End the quotation. By means of this unification of living space and museum space, museum conservation becomes the technology of internal life. We can recognize some similarities with Givadino's concept of artistic robots as a utopian promise of emancipated technology, which are supposed to lead a kind of artificial life of their own in Earth's orbit. After the completion of this 50-year theatrical project in 2045. In Russian, I'm sorry, do I have enough time for 5 minutes? Okay, perfect. Živadino, together with his collaborators, Dunja Zupancic, Miha Turšić, and others, has also launched the initiative of space culturalization. They want to complement the militaristic and commercial use of space with the culturalization of space. One of the steps towards achieving this goal was the aforementioned Cultural Center for European Space Technologies, built in 2012 and in the small town of Vitanje, and rededicated in 2017. The authors of XEOT wanted to highlight the interaction between the local community program and the international XEOT program, focused on the culturalization of space and the integration of science and art. The building is also the central cultural space in Vitanje, where the family on the mother side of the pioneer of space technologies, Herman Potočnik Noordung, comes from. His memorial room was already located there, but the XEOT also represented its global reach. On the other hand, the XEOT was intended for local residents, their associations, library, etc. But on the other hand, the center's focus on creating a cultural space program goes far beyond the borders of Slovenia. The original idea of retro-avant-garde or retrogardism in its aspiration to universality did not contain later Eastern European or post-socialist connotations. Its geopolitical placement. Živadina's retro method involves the reanimation of avant-garde artistic movements like suprematism, constructivism, Russian Kosmism, with the present openness to the past, of the past to the future, a movement that is in both retrospective and prospective. We are dealing, according to Inke Arns, with both post-utopian or retro-avant-garde repetition of the avant-garde of the 80s and retro-utopian repetition of the 90s. In the 90s, artists such as Živadinov began to read the avant-garde through its inherent but as yet unrealized technological potential for the future. The project of post-gravity art can also be seen in this vein. The historical avant-garde resonates in the project as a demand for change by means of advanced technology, not only in art, but in the status of man and the world. Fedorov's utopian post-terrestrial vision, based on his heretical revision of Christianity, inseparable from technological and scientific progress, fits into an accelerationist, oh, this terrible word, help me, accelerationist disposition with the corresponding elaboration of concepts and images of the future. Živadinov, in his return to Fedorov's project, foregrounds the question of mastering nature, challenging gravity and death, in the context of space exploration, in order to accelerate to ever more unknown spaces and life forms. We can refer here to accelerationist and speculative realist understanding of our complex or more than human societies in their speculative temporality, which is no longer linear but arises from the future. The hallmark of a specific disposition of the Noordung Project is speculation about its potential future consequences for culture, society, and humanity in general. Its conceptual speculativity is essentially linked to the technological structures of the future. There are also some accelerationist aspirations of the project toward a speculative futurity. To summarize, the creators of the post-gravity art projects not only systematically develop a new methodology and terminology, but also constantly discuss its historical supports in various forms such as performances, exhibition performances, lectures, and other public manifestations. We have mentioned only the most representative ones here, and in this respect are the dedicated guardians or caretakers of the avant-garde heritage. On the other hand, they also care about the future. Their project presents a concept of post-gravity art that comes from the future as something absolutely new. Thank you.